Welcome to Fear and Greed, the week ahead. I'm Sean Aylmer, and as always, at this time on a Monday morning, I'm joined by economist Stephen Koukoulas. You'll find him at thekouk.com, THEKOUK.com, and on X using the handle thekouk. Stephen, good morning.
Good morning, Sean.
Well, quite the week last week. Nothing bigger than those GDP figures.
Nothing bigger, nothing smaller. It was a 0.1% rise. So thankfully it wasn't zero or negative, because that would have set the hairs running, I'm sure. But even as it stands, and I think this is the common interpretation, is that the economy kicked off 2024, because these are the March quarter numbers, really weak. 0.1% quarterly GDP growth is dismal, to be frank.
Yep.
We in Australia, we're used to quarterly GDP being around about that 0.7, 0.8. If we're doing that on average, we're doing pretty well. Not too hot, not too cold. But we had a 0.1, which followed a 0.3, which followed a 0.2. So you can sort of see that the last 3 quarters in particular have been really poor. And as the media pumped out last week, and have been for some time, and rightly so, by the way, if it wasn't for population growth, we'd be going backwards, because that 0.5% population growth per quarter means that in per capita terms, we've been going backwards for 4.5 quarters now, which is why people are feeling the pain, I think.
Within those GDP figures, because it gives so much information around business investment, housing investment, government spending, trade, household, was there anything in particular that you kind of grabbed your attention that surprised you?
Yeah, a couple of little bits, and this is sort of a good news, bad news, and in-between news. So there's a little bit, as you said, there's something for everybody. The reasonably encouraging news is that we know that business investment is doing okay. I wouldn't say it's strong, but that's one of the things that's keeping a bit of a floor under bottom line economic growth, that we've got the business sector continuing to buy machinery and equipment and buildings and structures and these sorts of things, although there was a little bit of a quirk in the quarterly numbers. But broadly speaking, the business sector is okay. Bad news, household saving ratio fell to almost 0%, 0.7 I think it was for the quarter, which when we're used to about plus 5% household saving ratio, which means that of every sort of $100 that the household sector earns in a quarter, we spend 95, we put 5 into savings. Because of cost of living pressures, that's basically nothing. And the fear is that it actually go to negative, which means people are not only not saving from their income, they're drawing down savings from outside the production process, outside the GDP numbers. And the other thing, which is, it sets us up for a bad next quarter. I know we've only just got these March quarter numbers, but 0.7, 0.7 of the growth that occurred in the quarter was due to a run-up of inventories. So without that, we would have been at minus 0.6, heaven forbid. But look, there's evidence that some of the mining companies are stockpiling some of their output ready to export, or maybe not. And some of the retail inventories are there too, sitting on shelves as retailers are not selling much of their stuff. So we always know that when there's a big inventory move in one quarter, it almost inevitably unwinds the next quarter, which puts a lot of heavy lifting on other parts of the economy for the June quarter numbers, which come out in 3 months.
So we better not leave last week without mentioning Michelle Bullock. She's in front of Senate estimates. But Michael Thompson made a very good point during the show last week, and I'm only just highlighting this because I hate to admit that Michael's making good economic points. He said, that we have press conferences after the Reserve Bank meeting, Senate estimates isn't quite as interesting anymore. And I think he has a point there.
There is a point, and I listened to it for my sins. And because the Senate estimates is made up of politicians, they always have a tendency to try to get a partisan point. So the coalition members are saying, the budget's going to be adding to inflation. And the Labor people saying, no, it's not. So you get a questioning that's sort of more partisan than genuinely digging into what the RBA is thinking. Although, having said that, Matt Canavan had a really good question of the governor about how they forecast the trimmed mean inflation rate, given that they don't know what to trim out of the inflation rate, because the trimmed mean inflation rate, you can go to the RBA website and have a look at how they calculate that, takes out the extreme price moves up and down to get the underlying inflation rate. And of course, you only know that after the event. So what are they taking out of the trimmed mean inflation forecast in a year's time? So really good question. But Michael's right. The press conferences and the like are a lot more transparent. It's a chance to actually ask the RBA governor, the ins and outs, the intricacies of the forecasts and the outlook for the economy. So that said, all of us economic pointy heads were looking at what she said, just in case she let a few things slip.
Righto, what about this week? The big number out this week's labour force.
Labour force, yes, that with the inflation rate are the two sort of drivers of what's going to be happening to interest rates. I think that's fairly clear. Look, we had the jump in unemployment rate last month from 3.9 to 4.1. A bit of quirkiness in that monthly volatility. So I think the market's looking for it to be relatively steady at 4.1% when we get the unemployment rate numbers on Thursday. Employment, we know that with this population growth, that we need to employ an extra 35,000 people a month to keep the unemployment rate steady. So hence there's a forecast for approximately 35,000 increase in employment, which is really just matching population growth. Anything weaker than that, and that influence that we saw last week from the soggy GDP numbers, a number of central banks, including the Bank of Canada, cutting interest rates last week, might just lead to a bit more dovishness in our own system if that labour market number is a little bit disappointing.
Stephen, enjoy your week.
Will do. Thank you, Sean.
That was economist Stephen Koukoulas, better known as The Kook. You can find him at thekook.com and follow him on X using the handle The Kook. I'm Sean Aylmer, and this is Fear and Greed, the week ahead.